Neon lights blinked like manic eyes, and voices clashed like swords in the dark. Yet in the heart of this chaos stood a man who heard none of it. His name was Judge Elias Harrow, and he could hear something others could not: the silence. Not the absence of sound, but the truths people buried so deeply that even their own hearts forgot. When a young woman was brought before him, the courtroom erupted like a storm. Alara, accused of a crime no one could define, stood trembling, her eyes wide and defiant. People whispered, some shouted, and yet, through it all, the judge heard the quiet, the invisible thread that tied her soul to the crime she supposedly committed. He leaned back in his chair. The gavel rested like a king's scepter, waiting for words. But the judge did not speak immediately. He closed his eyes, listening, not to testimony, not to cries, not to the panic that clung to every corner of the room. He listened to the silence that screamed louder than any accusation. The case was baffling. No evidence, no witnesses, no motive, yet the town demanded justice. Alara's hand shook, not from fear of punishment, but from the weight of being unseen, unheard, misjudged. The judge observed everything: the tremor in her left hand, the shallow inhale, the small hesitation before she answered questions. Each pause spoke volumes. Flashbacks of the crime night haunted her. She had been there, but not in the way the town imagined. Shadows moved, words were twisted, and someone else's guilt had found her as a scapegoat. Yet no one could see that. The judge could. Hours passed. He closed the courtroom doors, allowing silence to fall like a heavy curtain. Outside, whispers grew into shouts, but inside, only the judge and the truth remained. He could hear the delicate rhythm of Alara's heartbeat, the unspoken plea in her eyes, the tremor of innocence trying to survive judgment. Fina. The verdict had been given, but the echoes of silence didn't fade. Judge Elias Harrow left the courtroom quietly, but the city's undercurrents were restless. Alara's name spread like wildfire, not for her guilt or innocence, but for the strange calm she inspired in a room where chaos ruled. Outside the courthouse, a man in a dark coat waited. He didn't approach. He only watched. His eyes, cold and calculating, had noticed the judge's peculiar way of listening, the way Alara's presence seemed to stir something unseen. In those moments, he understood Elias wasn't just a judge. He was a sentinel of truth, and that was dangerous for some. Back in his chambers, Elias pored over old case files, each one a puzzle left incomplete. He had never seen such silence as he had in Alara, a silence that spoke louder than any evidence. Something was coming, something that would test not just his judgment, but the very limits of human perception. Meanwhile, Alara tried to rebuild her life. But whispers followed her, glances that carried suspicion, letters with no sender, threats hidden in polite envelopes. She couldn't escape the invisible weight of accusation, even after the gavel fell in her favor. Only one person understood the gravity of her burden: the judge. Elias began to sense a pattern. Cases that seemed ordinary were connected by threads too faint for most to notice. A missing item here, a silent accusation there, a town's collective fear acting as an invisible force. The judge realized someone, or something, was orchestrating events from the shadows. That night, as thunder rolled over the city, Elias received a cryptic message. A single sheet of paper with 3 words typed in bold, jagged letters. The country watches. He knew immediately this was no ordinary threat. It was a signal. Someone had noticed his ability, and they wanted to test it. And in that moment, he understood. The silence he heard was not just truth. It was surveillance, manipulation, and control. The city had become a living entity, alive with whispers, shadows, and the tension of unseen eyes. Judge Elias Harrow felt it with every step he took. The knowledge that someone, somewhere, was observing, measuring, waiting. The observers were no longer a rumor. They were a reality, and the silence he relied on was now a battlefield. Alara had been summoned to a meeting under the pretense of safety, but Elias knew better. As she entered the building, She felt the weight of 1,000 unseen gazes pressing down. Every hallway echoed with muted threats. Every flicker of light a warning. Yet, despite the fear, she moved forward with determination. Elias had taught her that silence could speak, and truth could be defended even without weapons. Inside, a room shrouded in darkness awaited them. The walls seemed to breathe, shadows shifting as if alive. And then the message appeared, projected across the floor in glowing letters. The country watches. A chill ran down Alara's spine, but Elias remained calm. He stepped forward, listening, not to the words, but to the silence around him. In the gaps between flickering light and shadow, he heard patterns. The position of cameras, the subtle vibrations in the floor, the faintest hum of electronic surveillance. Every detail mapped a network of observation designed to trap them. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the darkness. A man in a tailored black suit, face obscured, voice cold. Judge Harrow, your reputation precedes you. You hear everything, yet there are things even you cannot predict. Today, we test your limits. Elias didn't flinch. Instead, he observed the slight hesitation in the man's posture, the micro-expression of overconfidence, tiny cracks in the armor of someone who believed silence belonged only to them. Alara watched, fear and awe mingling. She realized that this was not just a test of physical skill, but of perception. And Elias, ever patient, ever attuned, began to dismantle their plans without a word.